Our story begins in a city that was like a cyberpunk city. In rainy weather, a group of people was passing by on the street. They were all dressed in business uniforms. The men were discussing a certain dog from Sodiman, because of which 5 people suffered. They were clearly unhappy with this person's behavior. This group entered an obviously wealthy building, with 2 guards standing at the entrance. The security didn't know who these guys were, so they asked with displeasure who they were. One of the group looked at the guards with a dead gaze, advising them not to interfere. He hit the guard, and with his arrival he opened the door he was guarding. Behind this door sat the one they discussed on the way, namely the dog from Sodiman. He was clearly glad that Chun Suk had arrived. But the guy was not at all in the mood for jokes, he came here for his goal. He was unhappy that the dog from Sodiman invaded his territory and left unscathed. Chun Suk was angry, he didn't like the impudence of this man at all. But he was completely calm and asked the guy to do the same. Chun Suk thought that the man had changed a lot. It used to be easy for the dog of Demon to kill a man, which made him a man at that time. By coincidence, now he is no longer who he was. After listening to this, the man felt that Chun Suk should live up to his status, since at the moment he had no right to speak so rudely. The guy looked nervously at his interlocutor. The dog from Sodiman said it all. Chun Suk ordered his partners to kill the man. One of them has already taken out a knife. And without thinking twice, he still made a shot. It looks like the blow was not aimed at the person who was ordered. One of the group stuck a knife in the back of his teammate, thus expressing his betrayal. This made the dog from Sodiman laugh, and in addition to this, he also called the guy naive. Chun Suk was a little worried about the knife in his back, as he was angry at the man's words and already intended to beat him. One of the group was exposed to attack. Well, taking advantage of the moment, the guy decided to hit his second accomplice as well. The man knew that Chun Suk was not the timid type, so he prepared for his arrival. He made just one click of his finger. And a large group of people appeared out of nowhere. They surrounded Chun Suk, each of them with a weapon. The guy was in a hopeless situation, which made him even more angry. The dog from Demon decided to kill the guy. Chun Suk screamed in anger as a large number of people with bats approached him. There was still a huge downpour outside. Leaning his hand on the stone wall, the guy bent over and walked away. He was beaten, no one would bend in such a situation. His thoughts were occupied with only one thing: what a bastard this dog from Sodiman is. Chun Suk intended to kill him. But the guy continued to be killed by severe pain. He stopped, because in such a state you couldn't go far. Leaning completely against the wall, Chun Suk simply stood and held his left side. He was in incredible pain, but for some reason he smiled. The guy's legs simply couldn't hold him up anymore, he began to slowly descend. And in the end I completely sat down on the cold asphalt. At the age of 18, he dropped out of school and joined a gang just to survive in this world. He drove away truly poor people. Killed the detectives who were watching them. A lot of people were crippled for life by his hand. 20 years have passed, and he has become the leader of the gangsters who have taken over Incheon. Is this really the end of his story? Perhaps he thought it was right to end his life this way. Tears welled up in his eyes. His morale was also killing him, but who could stand that? Suddenly something surprised him. He found himself in a white void, and also did not understand where to be. Chun Suk stood in this quiet emptiness, and thought whether he was in heaven or hell. Suddenly he heard a voice from the void asking the guy if he regretted his past. This angered him, veins even appeared on his arm. He wanted this voice to come out and show itself, so Chun Suk could understand who was talking to him. An incomprehensible white creature came out and responded. It was an angel who flew over the guy. He was completely white, he had no face and nothing else. Chun Suk could not believe his eyes. Apparently the angel blinded him with her beauty. The angel called the guy a fallen soul. Chun Suk has committed every possible atrocity possible. He should be sent to hell to burn in eternal fire. This clearly scared the guy and in some ways even upset him. But even such villains as Chun Suk have remorse. The main character did not understand how he could have remorse. Here a flashback occurs in his head, where he complains about a life that has gone awry for him. Chun Suk considered this a disgrace, but at the same time he did not deny that he was a rotten little man who was not worthy of salvation. He wanted to get his punishment quickly and asked the angel for it. But the angel gives him the opportunity to get another chance. What our main character noticed. The guy thought it was nonsense, he didn't believe it was possible. Chun Suk ended up thinking seriously about this proposal. He would live like a normal person, without killing anyone. Angel wondered if the guy's repentance was sincere enough. He also warned that no matter what the result in the new life is, the soul will no longer receive salvation. The guy began to be blinded by a strong glow that came from the angel. He closed his eyes tightly, covering his face with his hand. Chun Suk slowly began to open his eyes, noticing that the strong glow had disappeared. The guy found himself in a completely new house. He didn't yet understand where he was. The main character noticed that the clothes he was wearing in a previous life had also disappeared. Even the wounds and bruises disappeared from his face and body. He still didn't understand what was going on, and decided to go to the mirror to look at himself. The result of his rebirth also affected his appearance. He became completely different. He looked at himself in the mirror with big eyes, examining every centimeter. Suddenly the phone that was lying not far from him rang. Chun Suk immediately noticed this. The guy picked up the phone, not knowing who called him. At some point, the main character realized that in his new life he was still a schoolboy. He didn't understand who called him until his teacher introduced himself. He received a call from teacher Kim Pan-suk, who demanded that the student come to school. The guy immediately hung up, as he realized what an awkward situation he was in now. His appearance, his teacher, his room, everything that he remembers so well. The guy also remembered the day from which it all started. He went back 23 years ago, when he was still a schoolboy. The guy's eyes began to water. He realized that this was his chance. Chun Suk began to cry so that tears were simply dripping onto the floor. He fell to his knees and continued to cry with happiness. The main character was grateful to the angel for this chance. This time he promised to live like a normal person. He began to get ready for school, putting on a solid jacket. Grab your bag with all the necessary supplies. After some time, he was already completely collected, and already understood what the angel wanted to convey to him. He looked gorgeous, just like a schoolboy. He had the opportunity to change his past. What could be better? He walked down the street and thought about how he would study well at school and not do all the bad things he had done in the past. The guy looked at the town, and memories came flooding back, how long it had been since he had been here. Then a couple of guys turned to our main character, asking where he was going. One of those guys was Kim Suk-hyun, a local bully from Chun Suk's past. For a while they were even friends who took money from the boys and went to the billiard room. The guy was pleased to see his past friend and greeted him back. But Kim Suk-hyun and another guy didn't really understand this greeting. And they decided to present something to Chun Suk. The guy didn't really understand why his former friend made such a face. But then I remembered that he was now 18 years old, and he cheered up a little. The boys approached him with bad intentions, but he simply apologized for what happened, justifying this by saying that he was simply confused. Kim Suk-hyun wanted to introduce him to the elders, but he did not understand what was happening at all. Then the guy remembered how it all began. It was Kim Suk-hyun who introduced the guy to the organization, and since then he has followed this path. This was his former friend, the culprit of everything that is now happening to Chun Suk. The main character looked furiously at Kim Suk-hyun. It was he who ruined his life. The situation became tense, both guys were irritated. Kim Suk-hyun was infuriated by Chun Suk's behavior and wanted to teach him a lesson. The guy simply closed his mouth, which shocked him. Chun Suk grabbed his former friend by the head. And he began to press very hard in the cheek area. He looked furiously at his now rival. Kim Suk-hyun was clearly in pain from being squeezed so hard. All this was seen by another guy who was standing with Kim Suk-hyun, and immediately ran with his fist at Chun Suk. The guy noticed that it was not a well-wisher running towards him. So he immediately freed his hand for something more important to him now. Chun Suk immediately blocked the boy's blow, which did not please the aggressor so much. The guy asked the enemy again, as if he didn't expect him to do that. And without hesitation, he immediately repulsed the enemy. Such a strong blow to the face simply knocked him down. He had no choice but to fly and eventually land. Chun Suk wanted to end up with Kim Suk-hyun as well. While he stood there clearing his throat and holding his face. The guy didn't have to rest for long, a strong kick was already flying across his face. Having received a strong kick, Kim Suk-hyun simply flew to the side. But even this was not enough for Chun Suk, and he raised his leg again and swung. But the blow was no longer to the face, but to the body, to be sure. The guy asked his opponent lying on the ground to repeat his statements. Chun Suk thought that if it were not for Kim Suk-hyun, he would not have lived such a life. But the recumbent stood his ground, he still believed that our main character was crazy. The guy was completely infuriated by the fact that Kim Suk-hyun was still talking, and he made a final finishing swing with his fist. His opponent was already afraid of him and asked him to wait. Chun Suk was furious and seemed to have heard nothing at all. Kim Suk-hyun was already screaming, covering his face with his palm. The guy remembered the angel's words and immediately realized what he was doing. He stood up from where he was lying and immediately addressed him. But he looked around a lot, for which he received another punishment. Chun Suk warned that if there was another contact with him, he would kill Kim Suk-hyun. If these two don't want to die, they better not appear in front of the guy anymore. Kim Suk-hyun lay beaten and crying on the ground, and asked the guy what was wrong with him. Meanwhile, the road to school continued. Now the guy has nothing to do with this gang, and he can calmly continue to live a decent life. Further events took place at school. Then his teacher says that Chun Suk should leave school. The guy was a little confused and surprised. It turns out he had a lot of problems, in a sense he was even a school bandit. The teacher recommended that a student with such problems simply drop everything and leave. Chun Suk did not understand what kind of person was sitting in front of him and scolding him. The guy thought it best to calm down, he couldn't ruin everything here. He invited the teacher to just talk. Our main character explained to the teacher that he decided to pull himself together and go to school, this was the reason for his coming today. Chun Suk also admitted that he did a lot of bad things and he is just a rotten person. The teacher was faced with a choice, since he is a teacher, and he must take care of the students and not kick them out. The teacher was a little shocked by what he heard, the student seemed to talk like a hooligan, but there was something wrong in his words. He expected a completely different behavior from the student. Suddenly the teacher began to think, what if their school let out the most excellent hooligan? This was even beneficial for the teacher. The teacher asked the student whether he would definitely go to school now. Chun Suk asks you to believe him one last time. The teacher must have believed the student. Next we see a tag with the inscription 2-4. Apparently this was the name of the class in which our main character will study. Here classmates were simply talking about the movie Playing Boy. There was a lesson going on, but the students were as bored as possible and everyone did what they wanted. Suddenly the doors to the classroom opened and Chun-suk walked in. The students immediately noticed this. The guy asked if class 2-4 was here, since he had not been here for a long time and no longer remembered where it was. Chun-suk's friends immediately recognized him and greeted him. Even the teacher was a little surprised by the arrival of an active truant. But he even greeted her, he seemed to miss his class. The teacher just looked at him and was silently embarrassed. Han Ji-hai greeted the class. Then she introduced herself to the class and said that she was their class teacher and also an English teacher. The guys from the back desk immediately noticed her beauty and started asking indecent questions. The teacher suggested that we just conduct the lesson calmly and be quieter. Chun-suk did not consider the question indecent, the answer was not so difficult. Or maybe she's never dated anyone. The teacher was very embarrassed by what she heard. She didn't like that the student said so many stupid things. Chun-suk began to slowly get up from his seat, which scared the teacher. The guy saw no reason for the embarrassment, it was just a joke. But this confused the teacher even more. She grabbed her skirt with her hand in excitement. It would be better if Chun-suk did not come back, the teacher thought. Meanwhile, the guys from the back desks were still laughing and joking about the teacher. But our main character didn't like it much. And he gave both of them a slap on the head. Having called them ill-mannered scum, the teacher is not their friend to talk to her like that. He apologized to the teacher for being late and said that he would be on time. She didn't believe that Chun-suk himself apologized, she thought it was some kind of joke. The guy turned to a classmate sitting next to him who was wearing glasses. He insisted that they review the written notes together. The teacher couldn't believe her eyes, since when did Chun-suk become interested in studying? She did not consider the guy to be the Chun-suk she knew so well. While he looked at the tasks written in the book. Unfortunately, he didn't understand anything at all what was written there, but he tried to pretend that he was studying. Then a couple of guys asked Chun-suk what it was and what he was up to. But he thought that they wanted a fight and told them to attack, but they immediately denied it. Next, our main character calls them funny. Because I was going to live a normal life and I wanted them to mean it. But the guys were confused by what they heard, and they asked him again. He did not consider it necessary to chat much, since he really wanted to go to the dining room and eat. It turns out that one of Chun-suk's classmates was watching all this. Next we go to the dining room where our main character has already drunk juice. He was very happy because for the first time in 20 years he felt this refreshing taste. The boys calmly walked around the schoolyard while some girl was watching them. She greeted him, which surprised the guy a little. The student was a little in disbelief that Chun-suk actually came to school. The girl told the guy that Yong-ji Appa wanted to see him. It only just now dawned on the guys that the girl was talking to them. He remembered his also former friend, and decided to go to him after all. So he came to his destination. Yong-ji Appa himself was sitting on the steps with several other people. Chun-suk was not particularly happy to see him, so he just looked at him gloomily. Yong-ji Appa was the leader of all the bullies in this school, and while Chun-suk himself was studying at this school, they were not on such bad terms. Our main character did not intend to stay here for long and immediately got down to business, asking what he wanted. Yong-ji Appa thought the guy was rude and suggested doing a little business. The guy didn't like this idea, and he simply swore. The leader of the hooligans didn't really understand what Chun-suk just said. The guy decided not to stand on ceremony with him, and answered directly that he was not going to deal with a drug addict. The people were surprised by what they had just heard. Yong-ji Appa was in a hopeless situation, how did Chun-suk know about it? Next, our main character simply called the guy a moron, and what he knows about the future of this drug addict. He was tired of having a dialogue with this leader, and he simply decided to leave, warning Yong-gi Appa not to call him again in the future. Such impudence angered the people, and they rushed at Chun-suk. One of them grabbed the guy's shoulder, stopping him. Chun-suk realized that these guys didn't understand the good, and decided to start with the bad. The guys were very shocked by what they just saw. Chun-suk just sprained the arm of one of these high school students, suggesting Yong-gi to Appa to call it a day. The gang leader himself, although furious, was very afraid of Chun-suk. Next, Yong-gi Appa made it clear to the guy that he would not leave here intact. Chun-suk was smart, he knew that he alone could not stand against them. So he took one of their friends as a sacrifice. It put pressure on his wrist, which he might break depending on the gang's behavior. The guy warned that if anyone took even one step, the victim's wrist would be broken. The people were even more angry because they were not in an advantageous position. Chun-suk considered them cretins, because they themselves called the younger one, and they themselves are trying to bully him. The guy extended his hand and pointed his finger at Yong-gi Appa, offering him a one-on-one battle. Yong-gi Appa himself did not calm down, but became even more angry. Our main character gave the guy a choice: if he wins, then Chun-suk will fulfill his every wish, but if he loses, then Chun-suk will become the coolest in school. The guys thought that the guy was crazy for suggesting this to the leader Yong-gi Appa. Chun-suk noticed that his opponent did not want to talk to him, so he continued to put even more pressure on the wrist of one of his friends. Yong-gi Appa silently looked at the guy, he didn't want to take his bait. Although refusing was also humiliating for him, Chun-suk still decided to give him time to think. With a brain like that, Yong-gi Appa has to figure out which choice is best for both of them. The gang leader simply said to get lost, which greatly surprised the guys standing nearby. But Chun-suk only benefited from this, which is why a slight smile appeared on his face. Yong-gi Appa forgave the guy for the last time, asking him to let his comrade go and disappear. The guys who were near the leader didn't like that he was just letting Chun-suk go. But Yong-gi Appa decided to deal with him later, his comrade's wrist was more important than that now. One of the guys didn't particularly like the leader's answer, but it was worth asking him again. How immediately it calmed down and stopped appearing. Chun-suk considered Yong-gi Appa's answer to be an ordinary excuse, and in general it was kind of boring. Then the guy simply turned around and walked past the angry faces of the high school students. Fortunately, everything worked out. Chun-suk avoided a fight that could have caused big problems. But Yong-gi Appa was still infuriated that the guy knew about his secret. He intended to take revenge on the guy for today's shame. Next came a physical education lesson, which took place on a large field. The guys were warming up, doing all sorts of exercises. Chun-suk's thoughts were filled with big problems that he solved today. The next exercise was for the lower back, and the guy noticed a classmate doing it. It seemed to him that she was doing the exercise incorrectly, and he began to laugh at her, which made this girl very sad. She stood and was sad, it seemed that it really hurt her. But suddenly Chun-suk realized that he had seen this girl somewhere. She had a scar just above her forearm, which the guy also noticed. Here is a flashback of how this same girl sat in tears and looked at the guys who surrounded her and apparently bullied her. They grabbed her hands and tried in every possible way to offend her. She was hysterical from such bullying, which is quite obvious. She could not stand the bullying and committed suicide, as the article wrote. Then Chun-suk realizes that this is exactly the girl who committed suicide this year. Her name was Sim Jae-hee. The guy remembered this when he stood behind her. Then the guys just play basketball on the court. Chun-suk sat and thought why he didn't understand this right away. At first, the guy's second life seemed cheerful and joyful, but against the background of this, he forgot a very important thing. The mistakes he made in the past remain with him. The guy calmed down, closed his eyes and thought. He thought about how bad his life was back then. Conscience took its toll and the guy finally decided to apologize to the girl. But he didn't see her in the crowd of students. Chun-suk noticed a guy looking out from behind the gate. He immediately understood what was happening in that building. And then he headed towards those gates. The guy broke into the gate with his feet. And when he saw what he had guessed, he became very angry. He asked some freaks what they were doing here. Kicking one of them in the stomach. He flew into a concrete wall. The second guy was shocked and scared by Chun-suk's actions and started screaming. But the screams were useless. In the end, the boy still received a strong blow to the face. In addition to this, he hit his head on the stone floor. The bald guy sat near the wall and died in pain, barely asking Chun-suk what was wrong with him. Our protagonist doesn't care what this guy said and decides to kick him some more. He hits the guy in the stomach with a strong kick, which makes him even worse. Chun-suk continued to kick the guy, and at some moments he asked why they were bullying the girl. But the bald guy couldn't even say a word, he was in too much pain. Chun-suk was truly furious and eager to kill them both. Shim-jae just looked at this nightmare that was happening before her tearful eyes. The second guy tried to stop Chun-suk, barely holding him by the stomach. Apparently he only added fuel to the fire. And for this I received a 2 in the stomach. He was on his knees trying to barely breathe while Chun-suk looked down on him. The furious advocate grabbed the guy by the t-shirt and told him to fuck off before things got worse. Let him take his friend and get out of here, Chun-suk told the guy. Those two barely left the crime scene, and our main character remained there for now. Chun-suk only now realized that it was around this time that Shim-jae committed suicide. While the girl just sat on the floor, still in tears. The guy was a little pleased with the fact that it was not his fault, all the responsibility was on those two. He approached Sim-jae, asking if she was okay. But the girl pulled away from the guy, showing that she did not need help from him. The guy was confused by this. Why did she avoid it? And why is she looking at him with those eyes? He thought he saved her and she would be grateful to him, but things don't always go the way we want. Then another flashback flashed through, from the moment at school. Sim-jae dropped her pencil case, and this guy is in the way of the suburbs. He spoke uncivilly towards her, saying that she was in the way. The girl modestly apologized to him, explaining the reason why she found herself in such a situation. The guy started to leave there, calling her a hand-ass. Here Chun-suk brags to his classmates how coolly he beat some horse. He noticed Shim-jae sitting silently at her desk. The guy saw that the girl was very upset about something. Chun-suk asked his interlocutors what was wrong with her. They said that she was an outcast from high school, which shocked the guy a little. The guys called her face depressed and her behavior crazy. Chun-suk thought about the same thing, she even infuriated him a little. Here Sim-jae was bullied and abused. Chun-suk and a couple of other guys were doing this. He knew no pity, and simply poisoned the girl. This bullying has become a daily habit. With all her strength she asked the guys to stop, making it even worse for herself. In the end, they finished what they started and went about their business. She infuriated Chun-suk so much that he simply considered her pathetic. The poor girl was left sitting alone in the schoolyard. Chun-suk saw exactly the same picture at the moment. He stood in front of her full of shame and he had no choice but to simply remain silent. Now the guy really feels sorry for Shim-jae. There was real horror before the girl's eyes, she imagined these three offenders and was very afraid. Chun-suk told her that he was not at all like those idiots, although in fact he was much worse. He again extended a helping hand to the girl. But she still pulled away and turned away from him. Sim Jae-hee was afraid of him, but suddenly she heard an apology from him and opened her eyes a little. The guy was very sorry for the scar on the girl's hand. She was amazed by this and asked the guy again. He apologized to her again, upset. What happens next is Chun Suk's class. Classmates are discussing something interesting among themselves. And a couple of beaten hooligans sat and complained of pain in different places. All this was heard by Chun Suk, who simply sat and was pleased with his action. These guys threatened to write a statement to the cops against him. Chun Suk didn't like the fact that the guy thought that the police would save him. Our main character did not advise the guy to do this, since he could not even imagine what would happen to him after Chun Suk was released. He took him by the tie and clarified one more point. It was not Chun Suk who committed the crime. The students behind looked at this and wondered what happened. But the guy should have focused better on Chun Suk and answered his questions. Out of fear, he was speechless, and he could only silently look at Chun Suk. He fell to his knees in front of our main character, while he was warning the other students about something. If Chun Suk catches one of them doing dirty deeds, he will kill him and will not regret it. They timidly answered the guy that they understood him. Chun Suk sat on a chair with a very dissatisfied expression on his face. He also noticed that Sim Jae-hee was not in the class. He didn't want to be different from them, so he called the guy with glasses sitting with him. Chun Suk asked him where to go with Sim Jae-hee, to which he replied that after physical training she went to the medical office. The guy with glasses asked his interlocutor if something had happened to the girl. She didn't look very good, to which he received a not very pleasant answer. The main character again remembered that tear-stained and frightened face of the girl. He was worried about her, he thought she might do something to herself. Chun Suk asked his desk mate to wake him up when the lesson ended, but there were only 2 minutes left. He got angry because he had wasted a lot of time because of those two hooligans. Some girl came into the class. It was the teacher who was already starting her lesson. She stood near the teacher's desk and told the topic. Chun Suk was very bored in this lesson, and he asked his neighbor for a pen with a piece of paper. Next, the guy began to write down some kind of list. He wrote about a list of bad things that he needed to fix. Chun Suk was thinking about all the things he did in the past. The first thing he decided to do was fix his relationship with Sim Jae-hee. That's why I included this as the first point of my plan. Unfortunately, he did not know how to fix them completely, because this was the most important thing for him. He seemed to have managed to stop her from committing suicide, but there were still students who laughed at her. Chun Suk's help was to stop the bullying towards Sim Jae-hee. The most important problem was precisely the status of an outcast, which made the guy think. The teacher tried her best to explain the topic of the lesson to the students. But they didn't listen to her at all, and some students were already asleep. Chun Suk noticed that no one was listening to the teacher here at all. He decided to improve relations with the class teacher. It was in vain that he made fun of her in the first lesson. Further, his points became more normalized. They included the usual bad habits that are familiar to all bullies at school. He remembered the most important thing that he had almost forgotten. One of his problems was his father, so he gives. Chun Suk sat and thought about his future life, about work, but somehow it was too much for him. And also something that he could not do in his past life, namely fall in love. The guy squeezed the piece of paper, considering everything written not to be what he needed. His desk neighbor noticed this. And Chun Suk immediately asked him why he was watching him. It was approaching evening outside, the couple should have ended by now. Chun Suk was already pulling himself up to stretch his bones after such a hard day, but then someone called him. It was a teacher who asked the guy to look into the staff room before going home. She felt uncomfortable talking here. She would explain everything to him in the staff room. The guy simply agreed to the teacher's request. Further actions took place in the teacher's room. The teacher started talking when Chun Suk interrupted her. She was all attention. Our main character apologizes for being too rude in class. The teacher was at first surprised by what she heard. And then she even smiled sincerely. Still, Chun Suk has changed, and in a good way. The teacher just noticed this. The teacher had one request for the guy. He asked her again as if he had not heard. Since Chun Suk was tall and some of the kids from school were afraid of him, the teacher wanted to ask him something. The guy thought that she would ask him to keep quiet in class or something like that. But her request was different, namely, the end of the bullying of Shim Jae-hee, which should be influenced by Chun Suk. The guy expected to hear something different, but at the same time this was one of his problems. The teacher told the guy that she had already spoken with Shim Jae-hee, who told her about Chun Suk's help. He immediately inquired about where the girl was now, to which the teacher replied that she had sent her home. Chun Suk knew that Shim Jae-hee was constantly being bullied. It was very difficult for the teacher to talk to the girl, since she had a very reserved character. She thought that maybe the guy could help her somehow. Our main character understood what she meant, but he is such a bad bully, how can you trust people like him? But the teacher did not see anything wrong with this, since the guy himself had recently declared his desire to change for the better. He was surprised by the fact that she saw his efforts to become a better person. Before that, everyone considered him a complete moron, but a teacher is a teacher, there's nothing you can do about it. Chun Suk agreed to help the teacher, promising to make sure that bullies no longer pick on Shim Jae-hee. But he, like an ordinary person, of course wanted something in return. He had one condition for the teacher. She asked him again, a little worried about what he was up to. Chun Suk slowly approached the teacher, thereby further heating up the situation. After school she had to, well, then we all understood what the teacher was thinking. She was already squealing with shame and a little fear, she was a teacher and he was a student. But Chun Suk was just asking her to help with English, that's all. The girl couldn't believe her eyes and, rather, even her ears. She asked the guy if he really wanted to study English. Well, of course, he didn't intend to go to university, but English is such a thing that is useful everywhere, so in general Chun Suk wanted to teach him. He didn't know the English alphabet well, which made him a little ashamed. But the teacher happily agreed to teach him, to which the guy noticed with surprise. The teacher may not actually be tutoring, but she will consider it school faculty and will try to prepare the lessons. It seemed strange to the guy to be happy about this, since he just asked to work out with him. It seemed like all the issues were resolved, the guy could go home. The teacher still couldn't believe that Chun Suk himself asked her to study with him. She muttered something to herself with joy, and this was heard by one of the teachers in the staff room. There was a beautiful view of the school building against the background of the evening sunset. Chun Suk was already walking to his home. Yes, it was a hard day, after all, becoming a schoolchild again is not so easy. He was thinking about how he could hold out for another 2 years and was suddenly surprised by something. The guy noticed beautiful classmates walking in front of him. And I threw such thoughts out of my head. Maybe it won't be as bad as he originally thought. He was even a little embarrassed by such thoughts. Then he saw Shim Jae-hee standing not far from him. Why is she still here? It seems like she should have gone home. Shim Jae-hee walked very slowly, but did she do it on purpose? Sometimes the girl even stopped just to stand. Chun Suk approached her, calling her slow, which scared the girl a little at first. She soon realized that she was being addressed by Chun Suk, who continued to speak rudely to her. They stood next to each other and looked at the beautiful sunset. The guy asked the girl from tomorrow to never miss school again. He asked Shim Jae-hee to immediately report to him in case of further bullying. She was very interested in why this happened all of a sudden. But our main character just made fun of her a little. It was still strange that before he mocked her and now he extended a helping hand. Sim J, he didn't expect the guy to say that and looked at him very surprised. Chun Suk skipped classes and bullied people like her. He extended his palm towards her head, but the girl was already scared on reflex, thinking that the guy would hit her again. But no, he just put his hand on her head. From today, Chun Suk wanted to start a new life. Sim J, he continued to look at him in confusion and fear. She began to say something, which confused the guy a little. The girl thanked him, which surprised him. Chun Suk didn't want to be too embarrassed, so he returned to his serious appearance. Grabbing Sim J-he's hair a little. At that moment, the girl needed to get angry and call the guy an idiot, Chun Suk believed. At the traffic light, it is time for people to cross. The guy was already leaving, having pathetically said goodbye to the girl. He heard the girl say something, so he asked her again. But she didn't say anything, she just stood behind. Chun Suk crossed the zebra and once again said goodbye to the girl. He thought she was a fool because she was still grateful to him. The guy once again remembered all his problems and wondered what he was doing then. Chun Suk was already approaching his house. How suddenly the very angel who gave him this new life appeared above him. He saw how the guy tried, but it was just a small part of all the mistakes he made. And then the guy remembered that there was nothing to eat at home. Next, Chun Suk has already arrived at his home. He looked at the damaged piece of paper which was a list of his problems. He sat on the floor and thought. What will happen after graduating from school? He will have good English, but where will he work? It was 1995, exactly the time when there was a crisis in the world. During a crisis, stock prices will fall, but you can buy shares and hold on for 2 to 3 years. And becoming a dollar millionaire, Chun Suk is not such a stupid guy. It was certainly a cool way, but on the other hand it was a dirty trick. What if the angel thinks so and sends the guy to hell? And of course, this requires money. Time flew by so quickly, maybe he should have started preparing already. It turns out that all this time he was waiting for the noodles to cook. Chun Suk hasn't cooked for himself for a long time, finally he can enjoy this moment. Someone was standing outside the door and was about to enter the house. The guy immediately noticed this. It was his father, who, in the guy's opinion, came a little early than usual. He turned to his son, thinking that he was skipping classes again. Chun Suk has not seen his father for a long time, which makes him confused at the moment. It happened in Chun Suk's past. He was imprisoned, apparently because of something very serious. The policeman called the guy, saying that a visitor had come to see him. Chun Suk didn't know who came to him, he could only guess. What he saw immediately enraged the guy. It was his father who came to visit his son. But Chun Suk didn't want to talk to him at all, and also called him an old fart. The father was shocked by his son's reaction. The guy did not consider the man a father, since, in his opinion, he could not even pay to get him out of prison. Dad couldn't contain his emotions and just started crying. He fell to his knees from hopelessness. But the son did not even have a drop of compassion, he was callous and merciless even towards his own father. Chun Suk believed that it was better for Dad to forget the convict son and live his own life. From such words, the guy's father died, as the policeman told him. The man lived alone and eventually died from accumulated stress. The guy was holding his father's death certificate. There was no one with the man at that moment, so the police discovered him quite late. Chun Suk sat in the cell and roared, realizing what he had said. Tears filled his entire face, it seems the guy was still eaten up by his conscience. He sat and apologized to his already deceased father, in the hope that he would at least hear him from heaven. Here Chun Suk has already returned to reality, his father addressed him. Batak came and he won't even say hello, really. The guy told his father that he had prepared noodles, let him go to the table quickly. Dad didn't know why all of a sudden, but the son wanted to try to be a good son, which immediately calmed his father down. He wondered why Chun-suk had become so good, had he really come to his senses? The guy stood near the table and seemed to even cry a little, but not because he was sad, but because his father was alive. Chun-suk clearly didn't think that such a simple fact would take his breath away. They began the long-awaited meal together. The guy ate, sometimes looking at his father, who also calmly ate his noodles. Since childhood, Chun-suk has not loved his father. When he was little, his father constantly drank and abused his son, and his mother left home altogether. As a result, the guy became a bully while his father came to his senses and began to work hard. The guy thought that Dad was just trying to earn money for another bottle. But since then he has learned that the same drunk that his father was before did not drink a single drop of alcohol. When Chun-suk was taken to prison, his father tried with all his might to prove his son's innocence. He denied with all his might that his son could have done anything illegal. The guy thought why he didn't understand his father then, but only understood now. Even when Chun-suk did terrible things, the only one who was with him was his father. The guy could no longer hold back his tears. Dad noticed that his son was crying and asked him about it. The son justified his tears simply by adding a lot of pepper to the noodles. His father scolded him a little, why put a lot of pepper if you couldn't eat it? At that time, Chun-suk was more grateful than ever to the angel, who sent him exactly to the time where his father was still alive. It was early the next morning. My father was getting ready for work and complaining of back pain. His son advised him to stay home today. The father was surprised why Chun-suk got up so early, but the reason for this was himself. He made too much noise, which woke up his son. The guy turned to his father with a request. He asked Dad to be careful at work and not to overdo it. The father listened and promised to be more careful, mutually asking his son to adhere to this too. He stood up and walked out the door. Chun-suk turned to the angel, saying that he must provide his father with a decent old age, even if he has to go to hell. It was already light outside, the sun had long risen. Our main character goes to school again, although he really wanted to sleep on the way. In some century, he goes to school in the morning, but he still has to get up so early for 2 whole years. He passed by Kim Suk-hyun and another bully. The guy was smoking a cigarette and noticed Chun-suk. He approached the two and asked what they were doing here so early. Kim Suk-hyun continued to sass at Chun-suk. The guy realized that the bully wasn't particularly smart and threatened to hit him. He was scared of him, which made Chun-suk laugh very much. He advised Kim Suk-hyun to find a normal job, and not sit and suffer through garbage. It would be better for him to come to his senses and live a normal life. Exactly how Chun-suk does it. Students began to come to school, there were a lot of them in the schoolyard. In Chun-suk's class, everyone still did what they wanted, regardless of whether it was a lesson or a break. His neighbor at the desk was carefully reading the notes and preparing for the lesson. And the bald boy beaten by Chun-suk sat and was sad. Our main character sat down at his desk, thinking that he had arrived early, but his entire group was almost there. He also noticed Shim Jae-hee sitting not far from him. He thought about where he should start, approach her or something. Chun-suk turned to his seatmate. The guy asked him to switch places with Shim Jae-hee, just for a little while. The girl approached Chun-suk and asked him if he called her. He confirmed his words and asked the girl to sit down. While she was sitting, he looked at her carefully for some reason. Very, very carefully, from all angles. At first he wanted to work on the girl's appearance, the basis was already quite good. He asked Shim Jae-hee about his eyesight and whether it was that bad. Well, not so much of course, the girl didn't even have time to finish speaking when Chun-suk reached his hand towards her face. The guy took off her glasses, asking her not to be afraid of him, he wouldn't eat her. Shim Jae-hee asked for her glasses back, she was very embarrassed without them. Agree, she looked much more beautiful without glasses, which Chun Suk immediately noticed. He decided to test her vision a little by showing 3 fingers. Everything turned out exactly as he thought, those grandma glasses made her look like a hillbilly. The guy ordered her not to wear glasses from today, at most in class. Chun Suk wanted to say something else. He asked Shim Jae-hee to bring the money tomorrow. The girl agreed upsetly, and for some reason even started crying. They were talking too loudly and the whole class paid attention to them. The guy replied that if she does everything he tells her for a week, her life will change dramatically. Shim Jae-hee was still afraid of Chun Suk, so she answered doubtfully. Then came a break, during which our main character slept soundly. Suddenly, someone sharply opens the door to the classroom and shouts to Chun Suk that he is an idiot. Hearing this, my classmates were horrified for some reason. This was the cry of the bald guy who had recently been beaten by Chun Suk. Apparently they were able to wake him up. He woke up not understanding what kind of freak dared to disturb his sleep. Some student with a long chin scored an arrow for Chun Suk. Chun Suk himself did not know him at all and saw him for the first time. This guy has heard a lot about the beatings done by Chun Suk. Our main character asked Chun Gu and Jong Soo if this was their friend. The guy had also heard about Chun Suk's good technique in fights, and invited him to fight. Chun Suk still cannot remember such a person in his past. He decided to forgive the boy, because he did not want to start a showdown in the morning. Togo was infuriated by this answer and immediately started towards Chun Suk. While he yawned and thought about the need to sleep, the guy with the long chin punched him right in the face. Chun Suk was even in a little pain. The whole class was shocked by what was happening. Even Shim Jae-hee was very worried about Chun Suk. And the bald guy stood and praised his new friend for such a good blow. Now was exactly the situation in which Chun Suk could no longer restrain himself. At some point the guy became very wary. Chun Suk was trying to start a new good life, but then this guy really pissed him off. Okay, our main character realized that the enemy knows how to fight. So let him come and try again, Chun Suk will teach him a good lesson. Almost the entire school started running to the fight. Chun Suk was fighting with Chun Sum, the schoolchildren should hurry up. All this noise was heard by a beautiful student who was standing not far from the scene of the incident. Meanwhile, Chun Soo did not stop and continued to strike Chun Suk. But he blocked them quite well. The guy was very angry that the enemy knew how to fight. Chun Suk also defended himself very well, not missing a single blow. Chun Soo continued to hit the guy, but it seems he will get tired soon. He knew Chun Suk well, so he had no intention of continuing to hit him. Chun Soo relaxed and stopped hitting the guy. Chun Suk noticed that the blows had stopped. And here it is, the right moment, the guy lunges at the aggressor. And this was the chance to hit Chun Soo in the face. The guy thought that he had predicted Chun Suk's further movements. But that was not the case, Chun Soo seriously screwed up. And received a strong kick from Chun Suk. Chun Soo's leg turned out a little, which made her stance no longer so confident. Chun Suk, meanwhile, just stood and looked at his opponent, who could barely even stand on his feet and looked as pitiful as possible. But Chun Soo had the strength to make another lunge at the guy with his fist. And he hit Chun Suk in the face again, but was he successful? It seems that something didn't work out for the boy. The blow was of course good, but this time Chun Suk blocked it. And struck back a strong blow to Chun Soo's face. He flew a meter away, tumbling across the floor. It was too early for the guy to relax, he seriously thought about getting off so easily. Well, I got a slap in the face from Chun-suk so that he wouldn't relax. Chun-soo could no longer withstand the blows to the face. But Chun-suk continued and continued to beat him. The spectators were in complete shock, they began to be a little afraid. Sim Jae-hee also looked at this upset and shocked. Chun-suk was about to take another hit. Chun-soo couldn't stand it any longer and had to accept defeat. Our main character already felt the taste of victory, which made him smile. The man lying on the floor had no living space on his face and began to cry out of fear. Even those two rapists were afraid of Jong-suk. The guy realized that the two had never said anything about Chun-soo. Jong-suk guessed that the guy was sent here by Kang Yong-ji. But the person lying down simply made an excuse by saying that he knew nothing and heard nothing. Okay, then we need to continue what Jong-suk started. He was just about to finish off Chun-lu out of extreme anger. But he was stopped by Sim Jae-hee. Chun-suk paid attention to her and realized that he was overdoing it. She asked to stop because she was afraid for both Chun-suk and Chun-soo. The guy's hands were dirty and he noticed it. He went to the toilet to wash his hands and asked to tell the teacher this. Sim Jae-hee could only watch as Chun-suk left. Next it's off to the men's room, where the guy washed his hands of blood. While he was washing his hands, he was thinking about something. Namely, that it used to be the same as it is today. In a past life, when he walked the wrong road, he broke and beat everything and everyone. At that moment, everyone was looking only at him, and the gazes were so piercing that it was simply impossible to endure. Therefore, he was even more furious, not afraid of anything, then for him this was the only way to get recognition. But Chun-suk realized that he was very mistaken, and what was more offensive was that he only realized it now. The looks of my classmates were not full of recognition, but on the contrary, fear and panic from what he saw. The guy's condition became tense, he was angry with himself. He still has so much to go through, but he still steps on the same rake. Chun-suk walked back to his class. The guy was thinking about what to do with Kang Yong-ji. He hoped that he would behave quietly at least for the first time. Chun-suk imagined the face of the one he wanted to punch at that moment. He remembered that he must adhere to the rules, and in just 2 seconds he would run into a teacher who would come out on the other side. Bang! There was a collision, all the notebooks and sheets of paper flew into the air. The guy didn't notice who he bumped into, so he turned to him rudely. But then Chun-suk saw that he crashed into the girl, and he also became rude to her. Looks like she hit it hard when she landed. He saw that the girl he bumped into was his teacher. She also recognized the student and greeted him. Chun-suk had to see the teacher in a rather obscene position. But the guy soon stopped caring, now they needed to collect the papers. The guy asked what kind of papers he was collecting from the floor. It turns out that the teacher had prepared all this for him, which confused the guy a little. These papers contained all the basics of the English language. Chun-suk was delighted with the work of the teacher, which you couldn't tell from her appearance. The teacher politely asked the guy to feel free to contact her if he had any questions. He was a little overwhelmed by such a large number of tasks. The guy was pleased that the teacher tried and put it all together for his sake. Chun-suk was no longer interested in his former problems, he was now busy with his life. While he was learning the alphabet, his neighbor on his desk silently watched this. Sometimes a guy asked his neighbor how to pronounce certain words correctly. Chun-suk was already pleased with his progress. Meanwhile, the teacher explained to the students about a special sword that is kept in a Japanese palace. The guy didn't fully understand what the Korean sword was doing in Japan, but his friendly desk neighbor quickly explained everything to him. Chun-suk was already talking some complete nonsense, which seemed strange to the guy next door. Recess began, classmates calmly communicated with each other. Our main character's head was already boiling from an overload of thoughts. The neighbor on the desk picked up the guy, which he didn't like a little. The next lesson was music and they had to go to another room. Chun-suk liked the fact that his desk neighbor helped him so much, he wanted to make him his friend. He extended his hand and pointed his finger at the boy. He was completely attentive and simply silent. Chun-suk asked the guy's name. It turns out his desk neighbor's name was John In-ho. Some students were already in music class. Our new friends also entered the music class. Chun-suk did not know where to sit. During the music you could sit wherever you wanted, so the guy wanted to hide somewhere in the back desk and fall asleep. In this class there was also Sim Jae-hee, who wanted to sit next to the girls, but they refused her. The girl decided to sit somewhere where no one was sitting, namely on the first desks. Chun-suk immediately sat down next to her. He suggested that she go somewhere else if she didn't like it here. She thanked the guy for the offer, while he did not understand what she was muttering to herself. The classmates who rejected Sim Jae-hee looked at her displeasedly, discussing something among themselves. Suddenly the guy noticed something disgusting, which angered him. Sim Jae-hee's desk was covered in milk, with offensive inscriptions about the girl. The behavior of his classmates infuriated Chun-suk. He already went to deal with them. The girl upsetly told the guy that there was no need to deal with them, she was fine. But Chun-suk did not consider this an order. How could a girl even call this an order? The guy was already starting to get angry. The girl refused for the guy to help her, so he simply turned around and told her to figure it out on her own. Sim Jae-hee looked sadly at her desk. She took the napkins and started wiping up all the milk. Chun-suk silently watched as she cleaned up. John In-ho approached him, asking if everything would be okay. He meant Sim Jae-hee, because she looked so happy when she talked to Chun-suk in the morning. The main character was a little infuriated by such words, and if the guy was so worried about her, he would better go and help. Next, Chun-suk continued to carefully watch the girl. While she was carefully wiping her work area. It seems classes are over, it's time to go home. Sim Jae-hee was already leaving too. But Chun-suk caught up with her and immediately addressed her. The guy was infuriated by the fact that the girl ran away and seemed all poor and unhappy. She constantly apologized to him, which happened now. Chun-suk, to be honest, was already tired of this. Sim Jae-hee reminded the guy about the fight this morning. It was real violence, and violence is bad. Chun-suk thought so too, but he wasn't going to just stand there while they beat him. The girl was doing exactly that now. They were mocking her and she was simply silent. The reason Sim Jae-hee was bullied was her appearance as well as her personality. The girl herself knew all this very well. She knew that she looked like a fool and a loser, however. Sim Jae-hee couldn't help it. She thought that if she voiced her grievances, the guys would continue to tease her even more. The guy was very surprised by the girl's answer. She just wanted to live a quiet life without being bullied. While she was saying this, she became very upset and began to cry. Chun-suk needed to take matters into his own hands. He grabbed the girl by her hand. And he dragged her to go with him. All the way she wondered where they were going. In the end they came, and the girl could not believe her eyes. They came to the entertainment room. Sim Jae-hee was there for the first time. The guy approached one of the slot machines, which had to be hit as hard as possible. Well, he immediately hit a special pad that calculates the force of the blow. Chun-suk scored 782 points, which was the maximum score in that machine. The guy was very proud of his blow. Now it's Sim Jae-hee's turn to hit the pillow. The girl couldn't do all this and didn't think she could do it. Chun-suk was not satisfied with this answer, and he suggested that she try it. She stood very hesitantly near the slot machine. It was time for the guy to help the girl, and he explained to her step by step all the rules of hitting. The back muscles were also very important for the exercise. The girl was very embarrassed about something. She was embarrassed because the guy was standing too close to her. Sim Jae-hee seemed to already be in the right position. It's time to strike with all your might. She hesitantly hit the pillow with her fragile fist. The result surprised her. She expected the worst. Chun-suk guessed that the girl was feeling better now. When a guy gets into all sorts of trouble, he comes here and hits the slot machine, which really relieves stress. The girl, of course, listened to him, but unfortunately she understood little. Chun-suk wanted to make the girl bolder, which upset her even more. The guy really treated her badly himself, for which he was now very ashamed. He extended his little finger towards Sim Jae-hee's face. Even if he dies, he must keep his promise, namely, teach the girl to behave in such a way that she is not considered an outcast. He once again asked the girl, if anything happened, to immediately contact him. Without hesitation, she shook his little finger, indicating that she had kept her promise. It was already evening outside, and where would we be without a beautiful sunset? The guy was wondering who the girl represented when she hit the pillow. They were watched all this time by Kang Yong-ji, who was up to something fishy. This was a great chance to finish off Chun-suk. It was a new school morning the next day. Sim Jae-hee sat and thought about how he and Chun-suk shook each other's little fingers. After which she looked at her little finger. Someone approached the girl's desk. She thought it was Chun-suk. But it wasn't even Chun-suk, but according to the latest rumors, drug addict Kang Yong-ji. The girl didn't know who he was, so she asked him. He called himself a kind uncle who came to save her. Sim Jae-hee did not understand what the guy wanted from her, while he knew everything about the girl. Kang Yong-ji knew that Chun-suk bullied the girl from the first days of school, even the scar on her hand was because of him. The girl wondered how the guy knew all this. While Kang Yong-ji hugged his new friend. He was a bald guy whose wounds had already healed. The guy asked Sim Jae-hee to go to the staff room and say only one thing. The girl had to say that throughout the whole year Chun-suk bullied her and persuaded the guys to make her an outcast. And the guys had to confirm all this. Moreover, Chun-suk had a time when all mistakes and problems should have been avoided. Kang Yong-ji considered himself a very big authority in the school, and as soon as the girl turned to him, she would immediately cease to be an outcast. But Sim Jae-hee stood her ground. Chun-suk was now helping her not to stand on the sidelines, and she had a good opinion of him. The guy, having heard this, considered her naive, who still did not understand anything. Kang Yong-ji smiled evilly, because Chun-suk needed the certificate in any case. This was the reason for his good behavior. Sim Jae-hee thought about it. She really was stupid and naive, but the guy already thought that the girl fell for his trick. But Chun-suk was the first to volunteer to help the girl, and because of this she wants to believe him. At first the guy was not particularly pleased with what he heard. But then he smiled and took cruel measures. He grabbed Sim Jae-hee's shirt. Kang Yong-ji wanted to be nice to her, but his patience is not endless either. Did Sim Jae-hee really think that the guy was a complete idiot who didn't come up with anything? He had already arranged everything, the girl only had to fulfill his request. At the entrance to Chun-suk's school, some thugs with bats were already waiting. Today they wanted to finally finish off the guy. Sim Jae-hee thought for her friend and felt very sad. But an angry Chun-suk was already standing at the entrance to the classroom. He looked aggressively at Kang Yong-ji who was holding the girl by the shirt. The guy was a little scared when he saw Chun-suk. Sim Jae-hee also noticed her friend getting angry. Who was not only angry, but completely furious. The following shows how Chun-suk was able to get through such armed guards. He knocked out one of them with a simple kick. He, like all of Chun Suk's previous opponents, simply flew away. Our main character dealt with all the security. But one of them was still moving, and the guy decided to finish him off with his foot. He asked him what they had been up to since the morning. Had Kang Yong-gi persuaded them? But the fallen enemy simply found his words funny. In addition to this, he also dared to call the person who had just knocked him out. Chun Suk didn't really understand what kind of nonsense this guy was talking about. The guy also mentioned a certain fool in his own words, to which Chun Suk has already seriously noticed. He asked me to explain what kind of fool the guy meant when he spoke. He said that he meant the girl who walked next to him. Chun Suk immediately remembered Sim Jae-hee. But this guy's help was already running up to Chun Suk, which he immediately noticed. He had no choice but to just get angry, clenching his teeth. The guy needed to somehow break through this crowd, and he ran with a bat straight at them. Chun Suk had already run into the school, but a crowd was waiting for him there too. He knocked out one after another, no matter what. Everyone received either fists or a bat. Apparently Chun Suk even broke one's arm. While he was fighting off enemies, another one approached him from behind and hit him on the back with a stick. The guy was happy that he hit Chun Suk. But joy should always be in moderation. While the guy was standing and sticking, the main character had already grabbed him by the hair. And he just hit him in the face with his knee as hard as he could. The rest of the aggressors were a little afraid of Chun Suk, but now was not the time to give back. Chun Suk was already completely beaten and stopped a little to catch his breath. But there was no time to lose, because another batch of opponents was already approaching. The guy was already ready to fight off this entire horde. He tried his best to fend off the attacks. Still, Chun Suk was able to fight off everyone and staggered to class. The guy was already standing in the doorway. He began to enter the classroom when he suddenly saw something. At that moment, Kang Young-gi was just mocking Sim Jae-hee. Chun Suk was already burning like a demon in hell with anger. He immediately ran towards the guy whom he felt like he just wanted to kill. But fortunately for Kang Young-gi, a couple of his friends were standing next to him, who could delay Chun Suk at least a little. No such luck, they flew away in just 2 hits. Suddenly Chun Suk turned around and looked back. And I was very shocked by something. Kang Young-gi simply flew into the back of the main character. Whether it was a blow or a push is not clear, the only thing is that Chun Suk fell over from it. Sim Jae-hee squealed as she was very worried about her friend. Chun Suk was lying near the desks and muttering something about Kang Young-gi. The bully was angry and decided to finish off Chun Suk with his foot. He kicked the lying protagonist on the head. Tom was in too much pain from such a blow. Kang Young-gi didn't like the fact that Chun Suk wanted to take his place. It was his school. The girl couldn't stand it and simply hugged the guy to stop him. She was ready to do whatever he ordered her. But he simply slapped her in the face, ordering her to leave him alone. At that time, Chun Suk had already risen from the floor and shouted Kang Young-gi's name. He relaxed too much, he probably thought that he had defeated his opponent. Chun Suk swung at the bully's face with all his might. And he just hit him in the face incredibly hard. From such a strong blow, Kang Young-gi not only flew away, he simply turned over during the flight, landing very hard on the classroom floor. All his wards did not believe that their leader lost. While he was lying on the floor, passed out, Sim Jae-hee approached Chun Suk asking if everything was okay with him. But the guy now needed to catch his breath and say something to the class. If anyone else from the class continues to bully Sim Jae-hee, Chun Suk immediately promised to kill him. He even hits those who just pester a girl. Even those who will mock you on the sly. The guy addressed everyone present. He wanted everyone to know that Sim Jae-hee is not an outcast. Hearing the screams, the teacher came running into the classroom. He noticed the beaten Chun Suk and got angry at him, thinking that the guy was back to his old ways. Chun Suk was expelled from school.